Hello, fellow gardeners, and welcome back to the Humus Heritage. If you've been following conventional gardening wisdom for any length of time, you've probably heard the Epsom salt mantra repeated so often it's practically gospel. Sprinkle it on your tomatoes for bigger fruit, dissolve it in water for lusher roses, add it to your soil for greener leaves, the list goes on. But here's the uncomfortable truth that might shake up everything you thought you knew. The science simply doesn't support most of these claims, and in many cases, reaching for that box of Epsom salt might actually be doing more harm than good. Today, we're going to dive deep into why this gardening myth has persisted for so long, and more importantly, what your plants are genuinely crying out for instead. The Epsom salt myth. What's really going on? For years, perhaps even generations, gardeners have sworn by Epsom salt as a miracle cure for everything from yellowing leaves to lackluster blooms. Walk into any garden center, browse online forums, or chat with your neighbor over the fence, and you'll hear testimonials that sound absolutely convincing. But let's take a step back and examine what Epsom salt actually is. Chemically speaking, it's magnesium sulfate, a compound containing magnesium and sulfur. The theory goes that plants need magnesium for chlorophyll production and sulfur for protein synthesis, so adding Epsom salt should logically boost plant health, right? Well, not quite. The reality is far more nuanced than this simplistic view suggests. The problem with the Epsom salt recommendation is that it's become a one-size-fits-all solution to problems that are rarely caused by magnesium deficiency in the first place. Most garden soils already contain adequate magnesium levels, and true magnesium deficiency is relatively uncommon unless you're gardening in very specific conditions. Extremely sandy soils, highly acidic environments, or areas with excessive potassium fertilization that competes with magnesium uptake. When gardeners see improvements after applying Epsom salt, it's often just coincidental timing, or, a bit of a placebo effect, rather than a genuine response to the treatment. Meanwhile, the underlying issues causing plant stress continue unaddressed. Why Epsom salt falls short, and can even harm? Here's where things get particularly interesting, and honestly, a bit alarming. Plants don't simply absorb whatever we throw at them indiscriminately. They take up nutrients in specific forms and ratios that maintain delicate internal balances. When you add Epsom salt to soil that already has sufficient magnesium, you're not giving your plants a helpful boost. You're creating a chemical traffic jam. Excess magnesium in the soil actively interferes with the absorption of other critical nutrients, particularly calcium and potassium. This phenomenon, called nutrient antagonism, means that your well-intentioned Epsom salt application might actually be creating new deficiencies where none existed before. So, think about it this way. Imagine you're at a dinner buffet and someone just keeps piling your plate high with only one dish, blocking access to everything else. Even if that one dish is, pretty nutritious, you're still missing out on the complete meal your body really needs. That's basically what happens when we oversupply magnesium. Plants start showing symptoms of calcium deficiency. Blossom end rot in tomatoes and peppers is a classic example. Not because the soil actually lacks calcium, but because the magnesium overload has, locked it out. The irony here is kind of painful. Gardeners often respond to these problems by adding even more Epsom salt, thinking they just haven't used enough, when in fact they're actually making the very problem they're trying to solve even worse. Beyond just nutrient lockout, repeated Epsom salt applications can slowly change your soil's pH and overall chemical balance. Sulfur, which is the other component of Epsom salt, can acidify soil over time. And while, sure, some plants prefer acidic conditions, a lot of our garden favorites actually do best in neutral to slightly alkaline soils. Unintentional acidification can create a cascade of problems, affecting microbial activity, nutrient availability, and root health. The soil ecosystem is remarkably complex, and it doesn't take kindly to our heavy-handed interventions, especially when they're based on myth rather than actual plant needs. So, the true building blocks, essential plant nutrients, come into play. If Epsom salt isn't the answer, what should we actually be focusing on? Well, let's start with the fundamentals, the nutrients plants genuinely require for healthy growth. You've probably heard of NPK, the big three nutrients that appear on every fertilizer label. Nitrogen drives leafy green growth and is essential for photosynthesis. Phosphorus powers root development, flowering, and fruit production. Potassium regulates water movement, strengthens cell walls, and enhances disease resistance. These three elements form the foundation of plant nutrition, and deficiencies in any of them create immediate, visible problems that no amount of Epsom salt will ever fix. But the story doesn't end with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Plants also need secondary nutrients like calcium, which strengthens cell walls and is crucial for new growth, and actual magnesium, which is indeed a component of chlorophyll. Though again, deficiency is rare. Then we enter the fascinating world of micronutrients, iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, molybdenum, and chlorine. These elements are needed in tiny amounts, sometimes just parts per million, but their absence creates distinctive symptoms that are often misdiagnosed. Iron deficiency, for instance, causes intervenal chlorosis, yellowing between leaf veins, while the veins themselves stay green. This looks, superficially similar to some descriptions of magnesium deficiency, leading gardeners to reach for Epsom salt when iron supplementation is what's actually needed. Understanding these nutrient roles helps us connect the dots between what we observe and what's actually happening beneath the surface. Stunted growth with reddish or purple leaf tints? That's often phosphorus deficiency. Yellowing lower leaves that drop prematurely? Probably nitrogen deficiency. Brown, scorched leaf edges? Could be potassium deficiency. Once you learn to read these signs, your plants become remarkably communicative, telling you exactly what they need, and it's rarely Epsom salt. So, what should replace that dusty box of Epsom salt in your garden shed? The single most valuable amendment you can add to your garden is high-quality compost. Unlike the narrow, imbalanced boost from Epsom salt, compost provides a complete spectrum of nutrients in forms that plants can readily access. It's the ultimate slow-release fertilizer, feeding your plants gradually over time, while simultaneously improving soil structure, water retention, and microbial activity. Compost doesn't just feed plants, it builds the entire soil ecosystem that supports healthy plant growth. Whether you make your own or purchase it, incorporating compost regularly transforms gardens in ways that isolated chemical additions simply cannot match. For more immediate or specific needs, balanced fertilizers, whether organic or synthetic depending on your gardening philosophy, provide targeted nutrition based on actual plant requirements. A tomato fertilizer, for example, is formulated with higher phosphorus to support fruiting, while a lawn fertilizer emphasizes nitrogen for lush green growth. These products are designed based on plant science rather than gardening folklore, and they deliver nutrients in ratios that work with, rather than against, plant physiology. Reading and understanding fertilizer labels empowers you to match amendments to actual needs rather than applying the same thing to everything and hoping for the best. Here's the real game changer, though. Soil testing. For the price of a few bags of fertilizer, you can send a soil sample to your local extension service or a private lab and receive a detailed analysis of your soil's current nutrient levels, pH, and organic matter content. This takes all the guesswork out of fertilization. Instead of blindly adding amendments based on what worked for your neighbor or what some internet forum recommended, you'll know exactly what your soil has, what it lacks, and how to correct any imbalances. Soil testing is particularly valuable because soil conditions vary dramatically even within the same neighborhood due to differences in native soil, previous land use, and gardening history. Optimizing for thriving plants goes beyond just nutrients. Even with perfect nutrition, plants can still struggle if other fundamental needs aren't met. Watering deserves special attention because it's both essential and honestly, remarkably easy to get wrong. Overwatering is one of the most common plant killers, suffocating roots and creating conditions for root rot diseases. On the other hand, underwatering stresses plants and reduces their ability to take up nutrients that might be sitting right there in the soil. Most plants prefer deep, infrequent watering that encourages roots to grow downward rather than shallow. Frequent sprinklings that keep roots near the surface where they're vulnerable to heat and drought. Soil structure and aeration matter tremendously because roots need oxygen just as much as they need water and nutrients. Compacted soil, heavy clay, or waterlogged conditions prevent air movement, and suffocated roots cannot function properly regardless of how many nutrients surround them. This is another reason why compost is so valuable. It improves soil structure mechanically, creating the pore spaces that allow air and water movement. In heavy soils, additional amendments like aged wood chips or perlite can further improve drainage and aeration. Finally, we cannot forget the environmental factors that govern plant growth: sunlight, temperature, and humidity. A tomato plant in shade will never thrive no matter how perfectly you manage its nutrition and water. Lettuce in summer heat will bolt regardless of soil quality. Tropical houseplants in dry winter air will struggle despite proper fertilization. Understanding and working with these environmental realities, rather than trying to override them with supplements, sets you up for genuine success. Plants evolved over millions of years to thrive in specific conditions, and while we can push those boundaries somewhat, we cannot fundamentally change a plant's nature. Your path forward, the path to healthier, more productive plants, doesn't run through the Epsom salt aisle. It winds through compost piles, soil test results, balanced fertilizers, and a deeper understanding of what plants actually need to thrive. By ditching the myth and embracing evidence-based gardening, you'll save money, avoid creating new problems while trying to solve imaginary ones, and develop the kind of intuitive plant knowledge that transforms you from someone who follows recipes to someone who truly understands the garden. If you found this deep dive valuable and want more science-backed gardening wisdom that cuts through the myths and gets to what actually works, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share this video with fellow gardeners who might still be reaching for the Epsom salt. They'll thank you when their gardens start thriving. Until next time, keep your hands dirty and your mind open. Happy gardening from all of us here at the Humus Heritage.